There are only two ways someone disappears. Either they planned it or something stopped them. Because people don't just vanish, not in the middle of the day, not in their own neighborhood, and definitely not on a short walk. But Jason Jolkowski did. He left his house to go to work, walked down a route that he knew by heart, and somewhere between his front door and a high school just a few minutes away, he was erased. It was as if he stepped into a gap and never came out. And what makes this case so disturbing is that whatever happened to Jason happened fast enough and clean enough that no one saw a thing. Jason Jolkowski didn't just disappear. He was exactly the type of person that you'd expect to make it home. He was quiet, responsible, and the type of guy who went out of his way to help people. Sometimes more than he should. And that's the detail that matters. Because if someone like Jason disappears without a trace, it raises a much darker question. Did someone take advantage of that? Jason Jolkowski was born in Grand Island, Nebraska, to James and Kelly Jolkowski. He was a bright kid with a very specific dream. He wanted to be a DJ. He even worked at the local radio station where he went by JJ the DJ. And by all accounts, he loved it. Now, Jason also had a learning disability, which meant that he processed things a little bit slower than most people, especially in chaotic or distracting situations. But he never let that define him. And it wasn't like he needed help dressing himself or anything like that. He just took a little bit longer than others to catch on, which is perfectly reasonable stuff. But people remember him for something else entirely. Jason had an almost obsessive knowledge of sports statistics, the kind of person that could rattle off facts, names, and numbers like it was second nature. According to his family, his memory of that kind of thing was incredible. He was also working at a local Fazoli's restaurant in Omaha, trying to save money so that he could eventually return to college after being forced to drop out due to financial constraints. It wasn't where he wanted to be long term, but his life wasn't falling apart either. He had a plan, a direction, and he had people who cared about him. Which is why what happened next makes absolutely no sense, because one day, Jason left for work and just never came back. It was June 13th, 2001, and Jason was last seen leaving his house on 48th and Pinckney Street in the Benson neighborhood of Omaha. He actually lived with his parents at the time, and he got a call from Fazoli's, the restaurant, asking if he wanted to work a couple extra hours, and this was at about 10:30 a.m. Now, Jason didn't have any plans at the time, so he said yes and he got ready for work. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Jason usually worked the night shift at the restaurant for dinner. But this was a great opportunity and he didn't want to let it go to waste. So he walked out that front door, pulled the garbage bins in from the curb, and left for Benson High School. Now, I know that may sound weird, but the reason he went to the school was because his car was in the shop for repairs. And he'd made arrangements to meet up with a friend who was going to meet him at the high school and then take him to work from there. Now, to put things into perspective, Fazoli's was about 4 miles away from Jason's home, and he was more than willing to just walk that distance to work. But in the end, his coworker, Teresa, came to his aid and offered to give him a ride to the restaurant. Now, Jason had already informed his parents about this plan too. Kelly was also relieved that he didn't have to walk that far just to get to work, especially without a car. And his sense of direction was honestly a bit bad, so that was the plan and Jason went on his merry way. But at Benson High School, minutes passed and Jason didn't meet up with Teresa. It was 11:45 at this point, and Jason had left his home at about 10:45. This was a very long time for a simple 8-block walk. He should have been there in maybe 20 minutes at most, and that's if he stopped to smell the roses on the way. Well, after waiting for a few more minutes and still no sign of Jason in sight, Teresa did the next most obvious thing. She called the Jolkowski house. At the house, Jason's younger brother Michael picked up the phone, and initially he pretended to be Jason, typical kid behavior. Well, at first, Teresa was confused, but she soon realized the person on the phone wasn't Jason, but rather just his younger brother. And she explained the intensity of her anxiety and worry for Jason for being a no-show. So Michael confirmed that he saw Jason leave the house almost right after he got that call from Fazoli's. Now, it had been close to an hour since he left home by this point, and he still hadn't met Teresa at the school. So after all this time, where could he possibly be? Well, no one knew at that point, but soon, panic started to set in when it got darker, and Jason still wasn't home. He also didn't make it to work. Now, I'm not saying that skipping work is all that odd. Everyone can have something come up at the last minute and just be a no-show, but still, if something urgent had come up for him, then he would have at least informed Teresa so that she wouldn't have to wait around for him. Also, he didn't even contact his parents or his workplace. He was just radio silent. No one had heard from him since he walked out that front door of his house. Well, hours passed by, and now it was close to 24 hours, a whole day later, and there was still no sign of Jason. Now, his parents were starting to worry deeply, but they had to let that 24-hour window pass before they felt that they could report Jason, who was an adult, missing. And that's what they did. Now, the police took the report and they asked the usual questions. But you know how cases like this go. They didn't jump on the search right away, and they treated Jason as a runaway. Jason's family was feeling hopeless in this situation, mainly because the police weren't conducting immediate searches for him and following protocol. Jason's mom sat by the phone all day every day for any sort of hope. She didn't take her eyes off that front door. She was scared for her son. In her own words, she felt numb and like she wouldn't feel okay again until she saw Jason in the flesh. It took the Omaha police 10 days to really start taking his disappearance seriously and not treat him as some rebellious young adult who just wanted to get away from it all. But the thing is, Jason didn't have any reason to get away. He was soon starting a new job, and said job was offering him a tuition program, which meant he could finally resume his college studies, which were put on hold due to the financial strains. His life was looking up. I mean, sure, it wasn't ideal at the time since he dropped out of college, but there was light at the end of the tunnel. So why would he just leave everything that was about to start and just go somewhere else? And where would he even go? Well, another very bizarre detail was that he never picked his car up from the shop or any of his paychecks from Fazoli's either. Well, his parents visited the police station countless times during these 10 days, and they reasoned with the police to start searches for their missing son, who was clearly not a runaway. Well, finally, after those 10 days, the police relented, and on June 23rd of 2001, a neighborhood search was held by the police. Officers used every available resource they had. Horseback searches, aerial searches in nearby wooded areas, searches equipped with infrared technology. Everything was used in hopes of finding Jason or even any clue as to where he might be. But the elephant in the room was the glaring fact that police had let a lot of time pass in the name of protocol before they even seriously started searching for him. He could be anywhere, even in a completely different country by now. The police searched the same route Jason took on the day that he was last seen, but there was no sign of anything. Jason had essentially disappeared and completely vanished. The police even talked to Teresa, and now they didn't suspect Teresa per se, but they needed to cover any and every available lead at the time. They also talked to his employers and co-workers if there was anything suspicious about him leading up to the day he disappeared, but there was nothing. And if something was bothering Jason, he sure didn't let it show. But they took statements from everyone. But the case hit a dead end pretty soon. 11 days later, it was June 24th, Jason's 20th birthday. But there was nothing to celebrate. What should have been a happy and memorable milestone for Jason and his family was anything but. 11 days shy of his birthday, a young man disappeared, and there was nothing that led the police really in the right direction at all. As with any missing person case, a tip line was established, and the police actively checked every credible lead that they received. The police, as well as Jason's family, heavily relied on the public to come forward with any information they had. Obviously, surveillance cameras at the school were checked as well, and the police didn't see Jason arriving at the school. The school's camera was also the reason why Teresa was cleared of any lingering suspicion coming from the police. See, she was the last person to be in contact with Jason, and he was supposed to meet up with her. But when the school footage was revealed, Teresa was just as surprised as Jason's absence as everyone else was. She was genuinely waiting for Jason at the high school, and she couldn't have possibly had any hand in Jason's disappearance. So one thing was for sure now. Something happened to Jason, specifically on his way to the school. They didn't know what, but they needed to find out. So over the next few days, the police carried out searches in big public places, including Mahoney State Park. One of the tips police received led them to the very park because, according to the tipster, Jason frequented that area. But again, nothing came up. There were no clues, no evidence, and no sign of him having ever been in that area. The whole community was terrified by now. It had been weeks since he went missing, and there was just nothing. There were posters plastered everywhere, and the church that he went to nearly every single day and volunteered at, all they could think to do was tie yellow ribbons onto the trees and posts in Jason's remembrance. Everyone just hoped and prayed that Jason would be okay. But just like that, even more time passed. And as time passed, everyone started to speculate. By now, rumors and theories had started to swirl. The very first theory, which is not widely believed by anyone, is that Jason was a runaway. He was under some sort of stress. His life was derailing after he dropped out of college and didn't have money to pursue his academic dreams, and he just ran away from it all. Now, there are a couple reasons why people don't believe this theory, obviously. First of all, Jason was completely unprepared to be a runaway. He only had about $100 with him when he was last seen. He didn't take any of his belongings with him, and he also left his car, which, if you ask me, is essential if someone's trying to get away from it all. You at least need a car if you don't have money for a bus or a train ticket, and Jason really didn't. Also, he only took his work clothes with him. And to me personally, I don't think someone's going to run away in their work clothes. The guy was just going to work. If you were going to run away, wouldn't he need some other shirt? Also, the rest of his clothes were still at his house. He didn't even pack a runaway bag. And he didn't really give anyone the idea that he was sick or tired of anything and wanted to just get up and leave like that on a random Wednesday. Also, Jason loved his family. He always put his family and loved ones first. This guy would hang up the phone with friends to tuck his little brother in at night. If that doesn't say that he loved his family, then I don't know what does. He does not sound like the kind of person who would just want his family and loved ones worried and struck with fear of finding him gone. It just doesn't make sense. But that's the thing with this entire case. None of it makes any sense. It's widely believed that on his way to Benson High School to meet up with Teresa, Jason was tragically struck by a vehicle. Now, this theory has another theory attached to it. The accident could have gone one of two ways. The first possibility is kind of far-fetched, but just hear me out. It's believed that Jason sustained injuries to his head and maybe became an amnesiac. Now, I know it's super unlikely to happen and widely debated online if this is even true or not, but this is where we are. This theory speculates that Jason is still alive, but because he has amnesia now, he's somewhere else, possibly states away, and no one knows where he can be found because he doesn't even know who he is. But the other angle of that same tragic accident theory is quite dark. It's believed that if Jason doesn't have amnesia, the accident likely caused his demise. And in fear of getting caught by the police, the driver of the vehicle just got rid of Jason's body in record time. Now, this theory also has some questionable holes in it. For instance, it was broad daylight. How could anyone not see this accident happening outside their home or business on his walk there? The route that Jason took was lined with houses and other properties, so the possibility of no one seeing something like this go down is kind of unbelievable. But second, the last time I checked, accidents aren't exactly silent. There's commotion, especially if the incident occurs in a place that has several houses to the left and right. It's bizarre that no one would have seen or heard a car hit him. Also, the driver or assailant must have worked against the clock to try to get him into their car, come to terms with the situation, and get rid of the evidence. And then also get away before anyone came out of their house to witness it. It seems unlikely. But the other theory, the one that most people are starting to believe, is the abduction theory. This theory speculates that Jason was lured into someone's house or car while en route to the high school, and he was abducted and later tragically killed. In fact, the Omaha Police Department has now registered Jason's case as a homicide, so they might be onto something with this. But the big question is, why Jason in particular? The area where Jason lived was a hotspot for adult work and other associated criminal activity, so it's speculated that this might have been the grim ending of Jason's life, but we don't know for sure. It's heartbreaking to think that if this were the case, Jason just lost his life while going to work, doing something he did just about every day, it was just an ordinary day for him, and it's unfathomably sad. But even this theory has a couple other angles. The first is that Jason was abducted in a car. Jason was known to be kind and trusting and helpful to a fault, so it's not foreign for him to just stop and help someone who maybe asks for help. It's also speculated maybe he was lured into someone's car under pretenses, and then they abducted him before ending his life later on. It's also believed by some that he could have been lured into someone's house, too. He could have been lured into anyone's house on that 8-block distance, asking him to fix something in the house or something along the same line, and then he may have been incapacitated. But here's the thing. It would have been dang near impossible to tackle Jason down if his guard was up. He was a big and tall guy, and he knew how to protect himself. So unless he was in a situation where he could easily let his guard down and turn his back without expecting danger, it would have been hard for the assailant to overpower him easily by mere force. This theory also leads to a very weird and scary what-if scenario. What if this was the doing of someone who knew him? Because how else would they know that Jason had a heart of gold and was willing to just trust anyone in trouble? Again, I might be reading too much into it, but if this was the doing of someone who knew him, it's even darker to think about. The fact that anyone can take advantage of someone's kindness and trust like that is chilling. It's unclear if the police have checked into all of the houses that were on that route that Jason took, and where he was even last seen, because there's really no information that's been made public just yet. Now, there were a lot of serious offenders living in this same neighborhood as Jason, so it's possible that Jason fell victim to this ring of criminal activities. And again, it's unclear if this theory holds any truth, but at this point, theories are all that we have. But last, a theory involving bullies is also widely discussed among internet users. See, when Jason was in school, he was a victim of bullying because of his learning disability. It was speculated that Jason's bullies might have had a hand in his disappearance and his subsequent passing. But it's also worth mentioning that Jason had been out of school since 1999. According to his mom, Kelly, he wasn't being bothered by anyone after that time. And if he was getting picked on by someone, he didn't mention it to his parents, which would be kind of bizarre because they shared everything with one another. As of present, Jason Jolkowski has still not been found, neither in the flesh nor his body. It's now been 2.5 decades since Jason walked out of his house to go to work an early shift, and he didn't reach Fazoli's. On top of that, he failed to return home. The investigators in Jason's case believe that foul play was almost certainly involved, but 25 years later, they still don't have any answers or suspects or even a person of interest. It's strongly believed he was abducted on the spot either by a neighbor or a random person in a car, and his fate remains unknown to this day. The Omaha Police Department continues to investigate the case even though years have passed. But what's so tragic is that Jason's family doesn't have any answers, and they don't have any level of closure. They can only hope that their son's case is solved and brought to an end, and they still live every day in agony and uncertainty, in that seesaw of hope and despair, trying to find the answers to questions that left them dumbfounded in June of 2001. In light of Jason's disappearance, his loved ones did several things to keep his case alive, as well as prevent other people from becoming victims and reliving that same trauma the Jolkowskis live with every day of their life. Kelly and James founded Project Jason, which helps to help families with missing loved ones cope with those disappearances and help them learn what to do to try to seek help. The family also set up an independent website called missingjason.com, and it was done in a time when the internet was still fairly new, so it's highly commendable that Jason's family went to these immense lengths to learn something new just to create a website for their son. But speaking of the internet, in 2005, Jason's law was also passed by the Nebraska legislature, which provides a statewide database online for missing people. This was also specifically due to the efforts of Jason's family. Kelly was also given the Volunteer for Victims Award by the U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder 5 years after the fact, in 2010, for her work in supporting families of missing people. The truth is, Jason's case might not be solved yet, but what Jason's family is doing is keeping his name and his legacy alive, and it is truly admirable. And I just hope that they're doing as well as they can in times like this. It's incredible to see that his family, despite never having found their son, has been able to turn his tragedy and his memory into something amazing for other families who also have missing loved ones. And while they may not have been able to bring their son home just yet, they've still helped save countless lives and restore countless families. And at the end of it all, that counts for something.